the disarmament of NATO. It's not just the disarmament of NATO from a physical standpoint. NATO has lost all credibility. I mean, NATO lived off of the perception that it was this giant alliance with full of these modern armies with this modern equipment. And those Russians wouldn't dare mess with NATO because NATO had Leopard tanks. NATO had M1 tanks and Challenger tanks. And, NATO had stuff. And it turns out that stuff is garbage. It also turns out that NATO armies are useless. Germany, for instance, has been exposed as literally nothing but a bunch of, schnitzel eating, beer chugging, fat men who can't fight. They can't pass a physical fitness test. They haven't maintained any of their equipment. They are Germany's talking about putting together a 5,000 man brigade in Lithuania to reinforce the 1,500 battalion that they have in there. Except they don't have any tanks. They're like, well, we'll send the brigade, but we don't have, and we can't make tanks. Their industrial capacity has been diminished because of sanctions, because of the whole energy thing. And, they're now paying 3 times as much for energy. Their factories are shutting down. They don't have any, forges working. They're not producing the steel, the aluminum, or anything. So they can't make the tanks they need to build this magical army that they're talking about producing. When was the last time a German soldier actually put 90 pounds on his back, force marched 25 miles, and did a military task at the end under pressure? Never. They just sit there. They're a peacetime army of men who don't want to be there. What I mean by that is they can't get a job anywhere else. The good mechanics aren't in the German army. They're working for Mercedes. They're working for Audi. They're working for somebody else. The physically fit guys are playing sports. They're not doing this. The German army isn't, it's not a patriotic service because the Germans have forgotten what it means to be patriotic. So they have a military of men who aren't good at anything. They're definitely not good at fighting. And the German army has already admitted that there's nothing that can stop the Russians from reaching the Oder River if they wanted to reach the Oder River. The good news for NATO is Russia doesn't want to do any of that. All Russia wants to do is be Russia. And this is the other thing that's happened here, because Russia has redefined itself. I don't know if anybody picked up on, the statements made earlier this year by Putin and by Lavrov about Russia's new foreign policy. And it's hinged on 2 things: the issue of Russian sovereignty and the issue on Russian what's the word I'm looking for? Not sustainability, but self-reliance. So basically, when Russia started the special military operation, their economy was woven in with the West, and Russians still had this inferiority complex about, everything's better in New York, everything's better in Berlin, everything's better in Paris. Larry, you were just in Moscow.
Yeah.
Everything ain't better in all these other cities. Moscow's pretty damn good.
Right.
And Russia's pretty good. I was in the other parts of Russia, in the cities that aren't heralded: Novosibirsk, Irkutsk, Ekaterinburg, Izhevsk, Vodkinsk. They're doing okay too.
Yeah.
Russia's doing okay. It's not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that. I mean, Moscow's damn close to being perfect, but Russia is, it's got issues. Hell, they were in the 1990s. Russia was a destroyed economy, a destroyed society.
Right.
It's, Putin has been rebuilding them for 23 years successfully. But that thing that came out of this conflict is Russia has divorced itself from the West. They are done with the West. That doesn't mean that they'll never be friends with the West. They will. But Russia will never again allow the West to be in a position where Russia will be reliant upon them. Those days are over. This is a new Russia. This is a Russia that has said that Russia will never again be subordinated to the West culturally either. The day that the Russians go, oh, those French have better culture than us, is over. Russia's now said we are one of the major civilizations of the world, one of the major cultures of the world. This has been a paradigm shift in terms of Russia's approach to interacting world. This is the big thing. Defeating Ukraine was automatic. Russia was always going to defeat Ukraine. The timing of it and how that was going to happen, it could be flicks. The defeat of NATO was never intended. That's NATO's fault for jumping in. But the redefinition of Russia is the biggest story here, because Russia now will never back down. And there's a reason why the United States and Europe wanted to break Russia up at the end of the Soviet Union, because Russia is a huge landmass with a whole bunch of potential, a whole bunch of potential. And when you combine that landmass and that potential, you create a problem that the West can't contain. So we wanted to break it up. That's over now. Russia is united, Russia is whole, and they will emerge as, one of the top three powers. I mean, they are already, the top three powers, but they are going to be, I remember how, everybody talked about, Russia's just a gas station with a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. Blinken, Biden, they've all said it. Yep.
McCain. Well, Russia ain't a gas station. Russia is one of the most diverse, culturally diverse, one of the most intellectually advanced, and one of the most industrially advanced. And I'll leave it at this. All the revolutions that are taking place right now on the battlefield, to give you an example, Ukrainian airplanes started dropping out of the sky where they never dropped out of the sky before. And the Ukrainians are going, what the hell happened? Well, see, Russia sat there and watched and listened. And in less than a year was able to develop a weapon that could be fired and enter into the supposed safe zone without the Ukrainians detecting it and taking out their planes. Because Russia doesn't have a defense industry that's about gouging the taxpayer. The Russian defense industry receives inputs from the field, adapts and develops and then deploys and then perfects. And the Russian weapons today are all being fine-tuned to destroy Western weapons. Meanwhile, we're still putting out crap that breaks, crap that doesn't work. We haven't refined anything. Larry, do you think the U.S. Army has developed a drone doctrine that has FPV drones at the company level, maneuvering with no. And if you ain't doing that, you're going to lose a lot of guys, because that's the new face of war. And if you don't have your drone capability, you're going to lose too.
Yeah, no, they're starting to wake up to it, but I'm not even sure. I spent 23 years scripting terrorism exercises for JSOC, and so these involved terrorist scenarios in all corners of the world, everything from nuclear to chem bio and conventional terrorism. And we always had this process at the end, a hot wash, which was called lessons learned. And what I can say after all that time is nobody learned a damn thing. There were no lessons learned. There were needed and never learned. Now, I want to go back to something that Scott said, that just to put a exclamation mark on it. 43 years ago, when I was teaching at American University while trying to do a PhD, I took a group of students down to the Russian embassy. And we met, I think, with either the deputy chief of mission or the political secretary. At that time, the Soviets, when these guys were Russian, they were insecure, and they showed their insecurity by bragging and being would overstate things. And it was so evident that they doubted themselves. And that was the period when, blue jeans would be a big thing in Moscow. And the first McDonald's, I think, got opened in like 76, 77. Why that's important is I stayed 4 blocks from that McDonald's restaurant. It's no longer a McDonald's, gone. And the dealing with Russians, I dealt with someone from the foreign ministry, a very senior official. The confidence they have, the maturity they have, the calmness they have is really something that's it's enviable. You wish we had that in the United States. And I'm not kidding when I say that the United States is in the process of recreating itself into the Soviet Union, the old one, while Russia is in the process of making itself into sort of the powerhouse that the United States was in the 1950s, because they're excelling across the board. And I think the one temptation Russia will have to avoid is what has helped destroy America. That as long as you go outside and keep getting involved in foreign conflicts, keep butting your nose into the affairs of other countries, keep spending all of your taxpayer dollars on these foreign wars, you bankrupt your country in the process. And as Scott correctly noted, you go to Moscow and everything's up to date. It's beautiful. They don't have, like in San Francisco, you can get an app which shows you where all the human beings have defecated on the sidewalks. They don't have poop mats in Moscow. The streets are clean. It's big snow. People are out shoveling snow, and they got machines that work it and get it picked up. So, like Scott said, it's not a perfect place, but they've at least spent their money on making Russia great again. And that's, that it really has happened there. And what's so frustrating is in the United States, any politician, any political leader that tries to speak positively about Russia and why we should be friends with them is attacked, vilified, accused of being some sort of puppet of Putin. And what I'm afraid of is it's going to take us getting a bloody nose knocked on our ass before we may wake up and say, maybe we need to talk to the Russians.
Yeah. And it certainly is a new McCarthyism, so to speak, era here in the United States. And I wanted to get maybe your final comments before we move on to another topic on when I asked about the global ramifications of the Ukraine conflict. One of the things that's been going on is Zelensky's last presser, the one that you referenced, that you both referenced. He sounded quite down about NATO membership. But in recent weeks, there's been all of this hype on potential EU membership. And it almost sounds as if this concession of just talking about Ukraine's possible EU membership is just another reflection of the strategic defeat, this rot that is this project Ukraine. Maybe I'll let you and Scott first, and then Larry to comment on it.
Has everybody seen that movie Rudy?
Yeah,
it's very wonderful.
You all are more cultured than me.
Rudy.
And he's basically this small kid. I mean, he's got a lot of motivation, but he wants to play football for Notre Dame, and he walks on. And he spends every year he goes out there and he's on the practice squad and nothing. And they let him suit up in the end his senior year, but he's not going to play because he's not very good. He really doesn't qualify to do any of this stuff. But he gets in at the end. It's a happy ending. Ukraine is the story of Rudy with no happy ending. Yeah. Okay, the crowd can be shouting Rudy, 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 but what's really going on is they're getting Rudy's hopes up, and the coach just says, "No, don't send him in. Nothing. Sit on the bench. Not just sit on the bench, but get him the hell off the field. Get him in the locker room." Ukraine will never be a member of the European Union. It doesn't qualify. Nobody in Europe really wants it to be. This is one of these stupid political ploys that's put out there. And I don't know why the Ukrainians and the Georgians, because the Georgians have been given the same thing. You can be a member of the EU. No, you can't, Georgia. You don't qualify. The EU is an economic union, not just a political union, but an economic union, which means you got to sort of have a sound economy before you can be invited in. Ukraine isn't just a body on life support. It's dead. I mean, there ain't nothing there. You can put oxygen mask on it, put an IV in. You ain't going to recover that. The Ukraine only exists when we give it money. They don't have a viable economy right now. You heard Zelensky in his conference about, I need 6 working Ukrainians to pay taxes to pay for one soldier. So in the way, who's going to give me those jobs? Because they don't have any jobs in Ukraine. They got nothing in Ukraine. So Ukraine will never be a member of the EU. I don't know how to say that any clearer than this. This is one of those sick things that we did with Ukraine to lure them into believing that they could be a member of NATO. Now, no, I said they don't qualify to be NATO. They will never be a member of NATO ever. Well, I think everybody recognizes that now. So now they're putting out that last bit of hope. You can be a member of the EU. We'll fast track you into what? Fast track into what? Membership? No. This is the talks. We're fast tracking you into talks, which means we're going to drag it on. This is like watching a cat play with a mouse before it eats it. It's just sad, but it's Rudy with no happy ending.
Hey, remember that Turkey, the EU voted to let Turkey in too, the accession talks. That's about 21, 22 years ago. They're still waiting. It took Ireland. Think about this. Ireland, I mean, bunch of like to drink a bit, took them 20 years to get in. So, the notion that Ukraine's going to be bum rushed through the door, that's not happening. Yeah, but the other, I think Russia was surprised by the special military operation on several fronts. One, the weakening and potential destruction of NATO is one, but then it really gave the impetus for BRICS and the rise of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, creating an alternative economic system outside of the U.S. dollar denominated reserve system. And we're seeing, this week, the United States thinks it's being cute that, we're going to pass a law and we're going to take that $300 billion that we stole from Russia. We're going to give it to Ukraine. Boy, that'll be a game changer for them. Yeah, it might mean that, Zelensky can buy more cocaine. Okay. But apart from that it's the message it sends to the rest of the world is, if we do business in U.S. dollars, this United States can take our money anytime they want. And there's nothing we can do about it. So why would we want to get ourselves hooked into that kind of system when we can join BRICS and deal in our own currency? And so it's a fundamental change in the international economic order. The New World Order created in the wake of World War II with the International Monetary Fund, the Bretton Woods Agreement, the World Bank, the United Nations, all of that's coming apart. And the traditional U.S. leadership in that is crumbling. It's being dramatically eroded. And that's one of the things I think Russia awakened, it awoke to. It realized, as Scott said earlier, we don't need these guys. We're our own person. We can do our own thing. Now, if to that point, if we want to have a relationship with them, we'll do that. But, there's sort of like this spouse in an abusive relationship that's realized, hey, I can get away from the wife beater and I don't have to put up with that crap anymore.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. I mean, the world has changed quite dramatically since February 2022, but even in the last year. Larry, you were just in Russia. I know, Scott, you've been. We're talking about economic growth in Russia despite these sanctions. I mean, the massive number of sanctions. 2023 seems to be the year where it has become very clear. If it wasn't clear in 2022, it is very clear in 2023 that
3.5%. 3.5% growth right now in Russia.
Growth. It's incredible.
I have a video. I have a video from a friend of mine who was at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum earlier this summer, and he was walking around. And he just sends this video, and he's showing all the pavilions and everything, and then he just turns and he goes, "Thank you, Joe Biden," because it's the greatest success out there. These sanctions have just backfired like you wouldn't believe. And what again? Larry knows this. Danny, you know this well. I ain't an economist, okay? I'm a very simple guy. I'm not, one of these gee whiz, McNamara's gee whiz guys that's good with numbers and all that stuff. But in December of 2021, I wrote an article that said, if they try to sanction Russia, it will backfire and be the end, because I know enough about gas stations to know that if you've got a big old, Humvee that chugs diesel, you need a gas station that sells diesel at an affordable price. And Europe was this big old Humvee that chugs diesel, and Russia supplied the diesel. And by sanctioning Russia, they cut off the diesel supply. And now the Humvee's out of fuel. It don't work. It's sitting in the corner, rusting, falling apart because there's no spare parts. A Marine can understand that. You don't have to be an economist to understand that. Europe shot itself in the foot with these sanctions. Russia, meanwhile, was liberated from the oligarchs. All the money the oligarchs were taking out of Russia now stays in Russia, reinvested in Russia. Every city I went to, and Larry, I think Moscow was the same. Was that way in May? You probably saw cranes on the skyline.
Yeah.
Building. They, it's a growth economy at a time when the West is still, I think the EU just passed their 14th round of sanctions or something like that. I mean, the first 13 were so good, they had to go to 14. It's ridiculous.
Well, again, the book that needs to be written it'll be a short book where economic sanctions worked. Yeah, I would challenge anybody to cite me a single example in history where a country imposed economics, in particular economic sanctions on another country, and it compelled that country to both either change its policies or change its political leadership or both.
Yeah.
Not a single. I mean, the United States keeps trying it over and over and over. And what happens? Cuba? Iran? Russia now.
Iraq
looks strong right now. Venezuela looks strong, and it's not a strong country normally, but it is. It doesn't look like it's changing. Syria too. Yeah.
So I was never asked to write this when I was at CIA, but somebody said, "Hey, give us an assessment. Can sanctions work?" And I said it would be a pretty brief, succinct paper. No, they don't. Don't do it. Find something else.
Well, sanctions is it's not a policy. It's the lack of policy.
Yeah.
When we impose sanctions, what we're saying is we don't know what to do, and so we're going to punt. We're going to put sanctions in place to buy time, to look like we're doing something while we do nothing. Meanwhile, all we do is end up isolating ourselves further. Our strength came from the fact that we dominated the global economic system. And the only way you continue to dominate is by having people buy into it, and then they buy into it. Now you can, and if you're smart, you manipulate on the sidelines. You don't do the big thing because you want them to continue to buy into it. You want them to keep coming. You want them to keep signing up, get more subscribers, but manipulate on the sideline, control indirectly. And if you're clever, you own the whole world. No, well, see, politically, we can't do that because we have to have Marco Rubio and, Ted Cruz and all these other idiots. We're strong. We're America. Like Tony Blinken. I know we might get to China, but, we can only deal with China from a position of strength. Really? How about just dealing with China? That would be nice. But the point is, we screwed up because we sanction everybody and they end up saying, well, we don't want to play anymore. What do you think is going to happen, Larry, when they take $300 billion from Russia? Because up until now, we've had Janet Yellen and others say, we can't do that because that's illegal.
And Russia's going to put, Russia will take back loans that U.S. companies were expected to be repaid. Russia will just confiscate.
They got $300 billion worth of infrastructure in there. They'll just nationalize.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's foolish.
And it also means that nobody's ever going to want the dollar again or the euro again.
Yeah.
Which is happening right now. That's what the whole impetus behind de-dollarization isn't that the dollar is a weak currency. Actually, the dollar on the international trade is a very strong currency. Look at it. When you trade in the dollar, you don't have any of this messy currency exchange rates and this complication. Things happen smoothly because everybody's using the same currency. How stupid were we to end that system? What we've done now, though, is make the dollar a suicide pill, because now, SWIFT, I can't do, I'm a sovereign nation. I want to do something, but I can't now because my dollars touch or a dollar I use touched the banking system. So now the U.S. government can come and tell me what to do. I mean, the arrogance of the Congress to say, if you touch a dollar, we own you. And then we say we want everybody to have their fiscal, their reserves in dollars and euros, again, because of the ease of commerce. And we put them in banks so that things are convenient, things are fast, the transaction, and then we seize them. And people are going to go, well, I know it's inconvenient for me to trade with renmin and rupees, but ain't nobody going to be seizing my money. America has basically navigated itself out of a winning position. We were controlling the world because we had a system in place that enabled us to control the world with very little effort. And we've thrown that away because of sanctions, this arrogance, etc. And the world will never go. BRICS was a Division III football team a couple years ago. They weren't very, it was like BRICS, the potential of BRICS. Maybe someday they'll grow up. Bam, instant adulthood. Not because BRICS suddenly blossomed, because America became such a bad option that everybody went, got anything else out there? BRICS. And look, BRICS had to grow up quick. The South Africa summit they had, that was called rapid adulthood, where they had to come in. They talked about expanding. Russia's taking over BRICS on January 24th. They're going to expand and even expand more. They're off to the races now. Good job, America. Good job, Tony Blinken.
Well, one other thing on this, that America really is like poked one of its eyes out when it pushed Russia off SWIFT. Because why is that? Well, if you're transacting in dollars, any transaction in dollars going through SWIFT is going through the United States electronically, which means that NSA can pick that up and monitor every single transaction. So now what we've done is, we're not going to look any. We just poked our eyes out, so Russia can go do, if it was engaged with some skullduggery with its money, we're not going to see it now. And I mean, that's another self-inflicted wound. It just shows how stupid and short-sighted these people are. They just they want to do things
to build on what Larry just said. Tankers, old tankers. Russia's built this ghost fleet. I have to laugh about this because if you remember the arrogance, we're going to put a cap on Russian oil.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, they're doubling down on that supposedly. Yeah, that's
we're going to deny Russia insurance. Really? And you don't think Russia has a plan? So Russia went out and bought all the old tankers in the world, and they filled them up with oil. And now we don't know because they bought them not with dollars. They bought them on a market that we don't control anymore. We have no clue how many tankers Russia has and is operating. We have no idea what's going on. All these people that used to run the world oil thing and, I can predict the price. You can't. Because they don't know what Russia's doing. They have no clue what Russia's doing, because half of what Russia's doing right now is being reported in channels that the NSA isn't collecting on anymore, because we've allowed Russia to unplug from the known knowables. So we are, this is my frustration with people who are supposed to be experts in the energy security business. They haven't a clue about Russia. They don't know anything about Russia. They claim they don't need to know anything about Russia. They don't want to know. And this is why Russia's running circles around us, because Russia knows everything about us. Russia is very knowledgeable about who we are and what we are. That's why Russia's so patient. Do you see any panic from Russia? Larry, did you see any panic? No panic. There's nothing but panic in Washington, D.C. Nothing but panic. Why? Because they have no clue what's going on. They literally have no clue. All they'd have to do is pick up the phone and call the Russian ambassador, Anatoly Antonov, and talk.
Yeah, baby. It's episode 131 of Ask the Inspector on January 30th, 2024, or 2024, as it might be your want to say. Jeff Norman and Scott Ritter, our favorite weapons inspector, here as usual, back to our regular schedule. A little bit late today. Apologies for that. This is the lightning round. Every Tuesday, Scott answers each question in 3 minutes or less. We do it all in 1 hour. Let's get straight to it, except for one thing. I just need to know quickly, Scott, are you feeling better?
I'm feeling great, except my heart rate's up because Maverick had to do a security sweep of the area around my house before the show, meaning he escaped. So I was running around trying to bring the Pomeranian under control. So it's my fault that that we're running late, or should I say it's Maverick's fault. But other than that little bit of a heart cardio related activity, we're doing okay.
All right. Maverick is back.
Maverick is back. He's he doesn't think that he did anything wrong, that it's all my fault, apparently. So
Okay. All right. That's a good MO. Let's proceed with the assumption in general that it's always Scott's fault. The first question comes from Sonbo in Brooklyn, New York. How will the recent deaths of the Americans? Oh, maybe I should also should we do the coin giveaway? Do you want to do the New Year's coin or the friendship coin from last time? What do you think we should do?
What's our intention with the New Year's coin? Is
Well, I think we gotta get a new website going, which will take a couple of weeks or so, and then put it on sale.
why don't we let the audience decide? Would you want the one last shot at the New Year's coin, or do you want to go back to the old, the original, the OG coin, the original gangsta coin?
All right, let's spend 5 minutes with the comments, and then Yelena let us know which coin they want. First question is Sonbel from Brooklyn. How will the recent deaths of the American soldiers in Jordan, may they rest in peace, affect the U.S.'s involvement in both the short and long term? Is U.S. withdrawal a possibility, or will hostilities with Iran intensify?
Well, first of all, I think we need to correct the record. The United States maintains that the 3 American soldiers who lost their lives were killed in Jordan at a facility known as Tower 22. But Tower 22 is part and parcel of a larger base, the Al Tanf base, that's in Syria. And the Jordanian government says that these soldiers didn't die on Jordanian territory, that there was no attack on Jordanian territory, that whatever took place across the border in Syria, which is more than likely the case. But the United States doesn't want to admit that, because then they'd have to admit that they're sort of illegally occupying Syrian territory, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to embrace the notion that these soldiers died on Jordanian territory. I think that there's a good reason to believe that they died on the main American facility in Syria, the Al Tanf base. But the United States doesn't want to admit that, and there's reason, because we're there illegally. Joe Biden has said that he will retaliate, and he says he's already picked the nature of his retaliation. My guess is that this retaliation will unfold over several days, because it has to be different than past retaliation, which was sort of a tit for tat, bombing nothing just to be seen to be bombing as a way of, saving face in an effort to, do escalation management. And now that American lives have been lost and a significant number of Americans have been wounded, this will have to be different. And so, in order to create the perception of deterrence, I think we're looking at a bombing campaign that could be 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. According to the media, Biden has sent a letter to the Iranians through Switzerland saying, don't retaliate after this, as if that works. We'll have to see what the nature of the retaliation is, but I think what we're looking at here is an escalation. I don't think the United States wants a war with Iran, so I think that the nature of the targets will be such that the Iranians may be able to back away from this without escalating, but we have to see. If the United States bombs the wrong targets, then there will be retaliation. And no matter what, it's not going to stop the attacks from the Iraqi militias or the Syrian militias. And the final part of your question is the United States going to eventually withdraw? Yes. The United States position in Syria and in Iraq is untenable. The Iraqi government doesn't want us there. The Syrian government never invited us there. And eventually we will withdraw, regardless of what Victoria Nuland and other State Department officials say.
All right, escalation is the key word, or as John Kirby says, escalatory. Let's take a look at him.
We are not looking for a war with Iran. We are not seeking a conflict with the regime in a military way. And as I said in the opening, we're not looking to escalate here. This attack over the weekend was escalatory. Make no mistake about it. And it requires a response. Make no mistake about that. I will not get ahead of the president's decision making.
And as for the president's decision making, a short time ago, our esteemed commander-in-chief says he has made a decision. Listen to this. Decisive presentation.
Ago, we heard from President Biden. He told reporters he has made a decision on how to respond to the drone attack on a U.S. base in Jordan that killed 3 troops. Listen.
Yes. I do hold them responsible in the sense that they're supplying the weapons to the people who did it. We'll have that discussion. We'll see. I don't think we need a wider war in the Middle East. That's not what I'm looking for.
He's not looking for a wider war in the Middle East. Well, you can't argue with that, right? There it is.
Yeah,
Just decisive presentation. Is that decisive?
Decisive presentation. I really enjoy the fact that he's taken umbrage over the fact that the Iranians provided the weapons to the militias that struck American facilities, causing American casualties. He's really mad at the Iranians, but he somehow thinks it's great that we can pour hundreds of billions of dollars of weaponry into Ukraine to kill tens of thousands of Russians, and that's okay. The hypocrisy is unbelievable. And Maverick, he wants to say that A, he's sorry for delaying the show, and B, he agrees. Hypocrisy is unbelievable. Right, buddy?
All right. Apology accepted.
He was down below at my feet begging for attention because I was unhappy with him running away. So I had to repair.
He could tell you're a little bit angry at him. All right. Looks like everything is warmed up between the two of you. Next question is from Freddie. I guess that is Nietzsche in Bavaria. Jordanian cabinet spokesman Mohammed Mabiden, I don't know if that's spelled correctly, said that the strike targeted the U.S. base in Syria, as you said, rather than a base in the Jordanian territory. From an international law point of view, does it make a huge difference? Well, I didn't know you were going to kind of address this already, but here we go anyway.
I mean, from a law perspective, it makes a huge difference. But the United States doesn't care about international law, so in the end, it just doesn't matter. If U.S. troops are in Syria, they have no legitimacy, none whatsoever. There's no mandate for their presence under domestic law, meaning the United States Congress hasn't specifically authorized their presence there. And there's definitely no mandate under international law. In fact, if they're on Syrian soil, they're by definition war criminals because they're there in violation of Syrian sovereignty. So to be on Jordanian territory at the where they would be there at the invitation of the Jordanian government, it would show an attack on U.S. forces that are there, with legitimate purpose. So there's a huge difference, legally speaking. But since the United States doesn't give a damn about international law, at the end, it just doesn't matter.
Watch your language, Major.
Did I say something wrong?
No. We got a good suggestion, I think, from one of the audience members. Why don't we just give away the coin and let the winner decide which of the two coins they want? How does that sound?
Boom, boom.
Do we have a brilliant audience or what?
We do. Mic drop.
You are a hepcat with that lingo. Matthew, in New Jersey. 2 recent reports in Foreign Policy and Reuters suggest the U.S. may be looking to scale down their troop presences in Syria and Iraq, respectively. If true, Could this development be in response to Netanyahu's public defiance regarding the two-state solution?
No, I don't think there's a linkage between those two, not direct linkage. I think what we're seeing, recognizing, is something that's been widely known in American national security circles for some time. There's no viable mission for American troops in Syria or in Iraq. We talk about the counter-ISIS mission, the Islamic State mission, but there's been articles that have highlighted the fact that we haven't been doing a counter-ISIS mission at all. We're just basically there as targets, and inevitably something like what happened was going to happen. A strike that kills Americans, wounds significant numbers. It's just a matter of time. It's like playing Russian roulette. And so I think the Syria mission is untenable and will be terminated fairly soon. I think we could look at that happening definitely this year, maybe as soon as sometime this summer. The Iraq mission is linked to more legalities. You see discussions taking place with the Iraqi government on defining Iraqi-American security relationships, and depending on how that is defined, then a troop level will be approved. But again, I think the countering ISIS mission is over. So the idea of, we weren't supposed to have any combat troops in Iraq, but we of course have combat troops in Iraq, because who participates in those raids? Every once in a while, Delta Force sorties out of Erbil into Syria to launch an attack against some ISIS dude. I think that this is going to also, you're going to see it ramp down. It'll be done more diplomatically, not as precipitously as the Syrian mission, but either way, the Iraqi government has said that they don't want American troops on their soil anymore. And if this retaliation, we have to see what happens with this retaliation. If the President of the United States uses American aircraft or drones to attack targets in Iraq without the authority of the Iraqi government, we're violating Iraqi sovereignty. They're already mad because we've done that. Our drones have hit targets outside of Baghdad, and the Iraqi government's going, "You can't do that. This is our country. This belongs to us." And America's saying, "Stick it up your ear. We don't care." And I think if we do that again, striking targets in Iraq, that could worsen the situation in terms of Iraq's willingness to have continued American military presence. So it's very much a work in progress.
All right, Scott, are you in the mood to talk to old blind Jim?
Sure.
I talked to him the other day privately, and he scolded me. He said his name is not Blind Jim, it's Old Blind Jim.
That's right. He is Old Blind Jim. Yep.
All right. Old Blind Jim, you're on. Turn your computer down.
I'm working on it, boss.
Okay.
Okay. My question to Scott is, and this would certainly take moral fiber in our government, which I don't think there is any, but we have some 900 bases thereabouts around the world. And I heard you talk before about how short we were coming about the number of people in the military. So given that some people are talking now about conscription, do you agree that we should be closing the vast majority of those bases, bring our military folks home, all services, and give them the training they really need, and use what we have, those numbers, instead of conscriptions? Because I'm against the draft at this point, simply because the Anglo-American Empire is the one steering all these wars. Your take, please.
All right. Thanks for your call, Old Blind Jim. Take care.
Thanks, Old Blind Jim. He's a great guy, by the way, and he has a great dog. Let me put it this way. I think the military exists to win armed conflict. I do believe that we have to have a government that avoids war at all, if at all possible. That war should be the absolute last option, that we exhaust every means possible short of war before going to war. But if we're going to go to war, we need to win. And I will tell you right now, I will kick the living crap out of any conscript military in the world, the Marine Corps. A professional army will slaughter conscripts. That's just reality. And given the fact that today's military incorporates a lot of complex technologies that require significant training, we can't have a conscript military that's able to employ the weaponry that we that we've equipped our military with today. And if we want to do complex combined arms, maneuver warfare doctrine, we need professional soldiers who train all the time. Train far more than the, 2 to 3 years that you want. How long are we going to conscript people for? So I don't like conscription because it weakens us. If we have a conscript army, we're not very good. I would prefer to see us do what you say, stop these irresponsible global deployments, bring American troops home, and then focus on training to fight and win any potential conflict we might find ourselves involved in. But while we're training, we should be putting a lot of money into diplomacy to ensure that we never have a war. To me, the ideal military career would be 20 years of training. That's it. You join, you train for 20 years, and you never go to war. And that's a good thing because the diplomats are doing their job. But if we ever need you, you're ready, you're trained, you're prepared. Professional military force. I am dead set against conscription because conscript army is going to lose the war.
All right. Next question. Somebody asked, is it old blind Jim or what was that question again? Old blind Jim or it's old blind Jim. Old is first. I don't know if it's old like apostrophe or OLD. We'll get every nuance figured out.
He's old and he's blind.
Yeah, I know, but is it OLD or OLE? You know, we'll get it. Since he wants it precise, I'm willing to get it precise for him. Voss in the USA. In your opinion, who was tactically the best general or commander in the American Civil War on either side?
That's a tough one. But first of all, that's a picture of the Appomattox surrender. And I believe, I don't know if Joshua Chamberlain is depicted in that photograph or not. I think I see Phil Sheridan, Custer, Grant, but I don't know.
Well, let me just say, if it's the appropriate photo, I deserve no credit. And if it's the inappropriate question, I deserve no blame. The questioner provided this image.
No, it's a good photograph. But okay. I think that Stonewall Jackson was considered to be one of the best, operational tactics. I think it's the wrong term because tactics is down at the company level, et cetera. We're talking about maneuvering forces on the battlefield to have a direct impact on the battlefield. And Stonewall Jackson was probably one of the best generals that the Confederacy had. The Union had a lot of really good generals, but a guy who has shown true grit is Joshua Chamberlain. He, of course, commanded, I believe it was the 22nd Maine in the Battle of Gettysburg, Battle of Little Round Top. It's been shown in movies what they did there. I've walked that battlefield several times, and you can't help but get emotional thinking about what the hell was going on both sides. The Confederates running up, charging up that hill wearing wool uniforms in the summer heat. And then the Union guys on the top basically, running out of ammunition and having to fix bayonets instead of retreating to fix bayonets and charge. And it just happens to be at the time of the battle where the Confederates had lost everything. It was so hot. They were so tired. They had gone up that hill that when the Union came down with the bayonets, they surrendered and won the battle. So Joshua Chamberlain gets my vote for the Union, and Stonewall Jackson gets my vote for the Confederacy. But there's a lot of really good Civil War experts out there that are going to say, Scott, you don't know what you're talking about. I concede that.
All right. Who do you think will be the most impressive commander in the upcoming United States Civil War? That's a joke.
Hopefully we'll never find out.
Let me see. What am I trying to do here? Fu in Chicago, given that the pro-independence candidate won Taiwan's presidential election, do you think World War III is likely in the next 4 years? So if not Civil War, maybe World War III. Something's going to happen.
Well, Fu, I did 3 videos today, 2 2-minute topics and 1 5-minute factual. And because I was rushing to edit it, to get it out before this show, the 5-minute factual has disappeared. I think it got deleted and cannot be recovered. It dealt with this very issue. So you're going to have to take this as your answer instead of having a fancy 5-minute factual. The DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party won the election of president. The election was for two things, though: the presidency and the parliament. There were three candidates: one from the DPP, one from the TPP, and then the other one from the Kuomintang, the KMT. Kuomintang used to be the party in charge. They were voted out in 2015. DPP took over, and the Kuomintang had been pushing for, better economic relations, a peaceful resolution to the issue of Taiwan Chinese sovereignty, et cetera, et cetera. And so the feeling was that if the DPP won the vote and the Kuomintang lost, that this this pro-West, pro-independence party would inevitably lead to war, except they only won 40% of the vote. And so now, and they lost control of the parliament. They used to have 62 seats. They now have 51 seats. They are not in control of the parliament. The parliament controls the legislative agenda. And so I think what we're seeing right now is you have a president who does not have a mandate of the Taiwanese people. Fully 60% of the population do not support the policies of, potential conflict with China. They support peace, and the legislature is controlled by two parties that will be pursuing better relations. And so you're going to see a Taiwan that's going to find itself in a domestic political, dynamic that is not conducive towards war. So I actually think, even though the DPP candidate Lia Cheng-ti, I think his name is, but I could be wrong on that. I mispronounced just about everything I tried to pronounce. There won't be a war because there's no traction. He can't get any traction domestically. The parliament won't support it, and the parliament is going to be pursuing a separate legislative agenda, trying to improve relations with Taiwan, as opposed to seeking, independence and crossing red lines that could lead to war.
All right, let's take another live phone call. Hi there, you're on with our favorite weapons inspector. What's your question for Scott?
Scott, my question is, do you think that Sergei Lavrov will be part of the next Putin administration? And if not, who do you think will replace him?
All right, good question. Enough with the phony French accent, though. We're not buying that.
We're not buying the French accent. Just like you shouldn't buy my American accent. Although when I was speaking in front of the Chechens, there were two things that came out. One, my Russian is horrible, and two, I got a hell of an American accent when I speak Russian. But it's sort of funny. Sergei Lavrov is one of the most accomplished diplomats the Russians have ever had. But like all human beings, he ages, and humans, unlike fine wine, don't get better with age. He's surpassed the mandatory retirement age. He's there on a waiver. He may continue to be waived in. I can't think of anybody that the Russians would want to have as their foreign minister than Sergei Lavrov. But time takes a toll on everybody. And he or the Russian government may decide that it's time for him to hang up its spurs. But, the Russians they have a foreign ministry that is extraordinarily professional, staffed with some of the most accomplished diplomats. The deputy foreign minister, Ryabkov, is somebody who could easily step into that role. And Anatoly Antonov, the current ambassador to the United States, could very well be a viable candidate for foreign minister. The bottom line is, if Sergei Lavrov does step aside, he will be replaced by somebody who will be as capable. The Russians are professional. Sergei Lavrov is backed up by a foreign ministry staffed by professional diplomats who know their issues. He's backed up. He's not just a one-man show. He is a dominant personality. He has tremendous skill sets. But what makes him work isn't just Sergei Lavrov. It's the staff work that's done by the foreign minister, by the people under him who do all the preparation. That's still going to exist. And so even if you replace the foreign minister, I don't think you're going to see a hiccup in the system.
H in USA has a crazy hypothetical. Oh, one of those. Russia takes all of Ukraine, keeps the part that they want, then tells Poland, Hungary, and Romania that they can divvy up the rest on the condition that they leave NATO. Would they take the offer?
No. You know, the Russians believe in self-determination, and so there is a scenario, I believe, that Russia would occupy Ukraine and then open up for referendum. And there might be territories that say we want to go to Romania. There might be territories that say we want to go to Hungary. There might be territories that say we want to go to Poland. And then Russia would determine if this is in their national security interest. For instance, turning Western Ukraine over to Poland is something that, the Belarusians have said they won't be too kindly disposed towards. So, plus, if you don't cure the Banderist problem, you're just perpetuating, the ability of this Nazi ideology to resurrect itself down the road. So, I don't know. I do believe that Ukraine's finished. I mean, we've seen too many statements by too many senior Russians that imply that whatever Ukraine's going to look like when this conflict is over, it ain't going to be what it looks like today. And the government won't be the same and stuff. And so, we'll have to see how things shake out. But to try and lure Romania, Hungary, and Poland away from NATO by offering them territorial concessions in Ukraine is a non-starter.
All right, Scott, we have a guy named George who sent the same question in text form and also voicemail. He tried every method except skywriting, so he really wants to get his question in. Let's take his voicemail message.
Hi, Scott. My name's Chris. 57.
Whoop, that's the wrong
of
message.
age.
Sorry about that. Let's take this one instead.
Hi, this is George from Philadelphia. My question is, why was Ukraine potentially joining NATO more threatening to the Russians than when the Baltic states joined? Is the difference mainly geographical? They're both on Russia's border and have Russian populations, but it looks like control over Ukraine would give NATO much deeper coverage of Russian territory than over Estonia or Latvia. Anyway, would you please comment on the strategic difference? Thanks.
Sure. First thing is that the Baltic states don't provide any geopolitical viable geopolitical threat to Russia. So having them independent and even having them join NATO wasn't seen as an existential threat to Russia. Yes, there were problems with the Russian populations in each of these three Baltic republics. The Russian government, the Russian nation is not happy about how these populations are being treated, but this isn't, it's not an existential question of the survival of Russia. Ukraine, for instance, let's take the Donbass. The Donbass has always been called the heart of Russia. In fact, if you go back to the 1930s, there are posters that show that it is the economic heart of Russia. Even when they talked about Ukraine as an independent entity after the Second World War, it was economically integrated. It wasn't an independent economy. There was this integration, and the integration of the Ukrainian people and the Russian people was there in the military, in civil society, just culturally. It's one and the same. Plus, it extends into the heartland of Russia, literally abuts up against Rostov-on-Don, Belgorod, into Kursk, Voronezh. It's a shorter drive to Moscow. To lose Ukraine to a openly hostile military alliance like NATO that uses Russia as its reason to exist would be unacceptable. And to give you an example, people say, well, it's not threatening Russia. Well, what does Russia have to worry about? Well, gosh, the Americans put the Mark 41 Aegis ashore into Poland and Romania, two NATO nations. Oh, it's just certain anti-missile defense, except they lied through their teeth. The same platform could be used to deliver cruise missiles or modified surface-to-air missiles that now have a surface-to-surface configuration, which is exactly what the United States has done in violation of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, because all this was considered before the INF Treaty. We withdrew from it. And the Russians are saying, that ain't going to happen in Ukraine. We're not going to let you make Ukraine part of NATO, and then you forward deploy missiles now that when you fire them, they are minutes away from hitting Moscow. No, 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 and no. So yeah, Ukraine's a completely different picture economically, in terms of geopolitical posturing, in terms of national security. There's any number of reasons why Russia's existential survival would be threatened by Ukraine being a member of NATO. And the important thing is, we all knew that in the West. We knew it. William Burns wrote a memorandum, "Niet means niet," back in 2008, saying don't invite Ukraine into NATO because the Russians said no, and they're willing to go to war about it. And we knew why they didn't want them to join. So, yeah, no, Ukraine is completely different than the 3 Baltic states.
All right, just squeaking in 3 minutes. This is very, very strict. Next question comes from Zaki B in Toronto. Hamas seems to still have lots of fight in them. How long do you think they can sustain fighting Israel?
Longer than Israel can sustain fighting Hamas. Hamas has won this war. They win by not losing. Israel said that a precondition to victory is the physical destruction of Hamas politically and militarily. Hamas is stronger today politically than they have ever been. If there was an election in the Palestinian regions, Hamas would win the election overwhelmingly, be the president and control the legislative bodies. Militarily, after everything Israel's done, Israel's retreating from Gaza as we speak. They're withdrawing. Hamas is regaining control of territories. Hamas fought the Israeli army to a standstill. Less than 20% of the tunnels have been identified and destroyed. But again, I like that number. 20% of what? How do they? Because the Israelis have no clue what all the tunnel network is. If they did, they'd have destroyed them. They don't know where the tunnels are. So it's an estimate. We estimate that we have destroyed 20%, which means they're probably destroyed far less than that because they don't understand the total extent of the Palestinian tunnel network. Hamas prepared for this fight, and Hamas continues to resist. I think Hamas can go as long or longer than Israel can. So that's why the Israelis are withdrawing. They're looking to go for this long war of attrition. But I think they won't be able to sustain it politically. So, yeah, Hamas will outlast Israel. There's no doubt in my mind.
Philip in New York, as opposed to Phil in London. Did you see the hubbub that ensued over that? We did a highlight clip and made it about the Phil segment. And Phil himself responded in the comment section. Did you see any of that?
I did. Yes.
All right. Maybe we should have Phil on to debate you. It turns out he's the editor of some publication in London or something. So I don't know. Maybe that would be interesting. No response from the weapons inspector. I'll take that.
I'm up for any combat. So yeah,
right.
Phil wants to fight. Let's fight.
Philip in New York, as opposed to Phil. Why won't Russia help Armenia when it comes to Turkey and Azerbaijan's genocidal intentions? It seems like Russia has just been providing lip service, and their so-called peacekeepers haven't helped at all.
Well, that's just an absurdity. The peacekeepers are there to keep peace. But what do you want Russia to do? Rewrite international law? You need to understand that under international law, Nagorno-Karabakh is Azerbaijani territory. It was never independent. The Armenians carried out a war of aggression against Azerbaijan to take control, to evict Azerbaijan as the sovereign government of an area that, of course, it's primarily Armenian population. But what do you want the Russians to do? Because if the Russians turn around and just unilaterally say, yeah, we support Armenia on this, then Russia has, they opened the door. Russia isn't going to do that. So the Russian peacekeepers were there to protect the Armenian population, but the Armenian population belonged to Azerbaijan sovereignty. And, it's the Armenians that caused the problems. It's the Armenians that occupied, a significant percentage of Azerbaijani territory in order to create a land bridge between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, and then refused to negotiate in good faith to return that territory. So we've got that problem. We got the problem of international law and definitions of that. And now we have Armenia has not claimed Nagorno-Karabakh. Well, that's Nagorno-Karabakh claims to be Armenian, and Armenia provided weapons. I mean, come on, let's stop splitting hairs, okay? We know what was going on in Nagorno-Karabakh. It's Azerbaijani territory. It's not an independent state, and Russia was never going to recognize it as an independent state unilaterally. There would have to have been a negotiating process, and Armenia wasn't willing to negotiate in good faith. That's the bottom line. So Azerbaijan, together with Turkey, undertook military operations to resolve this situation. Given it Turkey's history with the Armenians, the genocide, the alleged genocide, whatever side of that argument you're on, 1915 to 1918, it's touchy. Nobody wants to see Azeris or Turks killing Armenians, and yet the Armenians lost the conflict and a lot of Armenians died. The other thing is that the Armenians are just dicks. Let's just straight up be honest about this. Vladimir Putin went to visit them a couple years ago, and the Armenian prime minister left him standing on the airfield. Now, if you want good relations with Russia, let me give you a pro tip. Don't leave the Russian president standing on the airfield by himself. He's likely to say, screw you. Boom. And then the other thing is they keep reaching out to the United States. You have to decide, Armenia, where do you want to be? You want to be a friend of America? Pull out a map. Look at where America is. Look where you are. Look who your neighbors are, and understand that your only chance at survival is friendship with Russia, and yet you're turning them down at every second. You're insulting them. No, Armenia is responsible for Armenia's problems. Russia has been a very good friend to Armenia, and they will continue to be a friend with Armenia. But there's only so much you can do when you have an Armenian government that appears to be wanting to align itself with a West who has agenda of using that realignment to undermine Russia. Remember, nothing the West does in the Southern Caucasus is to the benefit of the people of Southern Caucasus. It's done strictly to undermine and destabilize Russia.
How dare you?
I think I detect a pattern developing, Scott. Is it that anybody named Phil or Philip gets under your skin? Could that be?
Phil didn't get under my skin. That was a good question. The Armenians get under my skin.
All right. Sometimes it's hard to tell who the anger is directed at. Thank you for that correction. Turtle Y from Italy. You remember Turtle? Could you please share with us your thoughts on the assassination of Anna Politkovskaya? Sorry about the pronunciation, in 2006.
Well, my thoughts are that I believe, and again, because I'm getting this question without I believe she was a journalist who was investigating Russia's war in Chechnya, and she was investigating, things that some people consider to be sensitive, and she was murdered, found dead in her apartment. Who did it? They don't know. There's belief that she was killed by Chechens or she was killed by Russian security authorities, that somehow that her murder was, related to people in high places wanting to silence her voice. I don't know. I don't know what the truth is here. I do know that I've spoken to a number of Russian journalists who operated during that time. It is a very dangerous time to be a Russian journalist. Russia was still going through some very difficult transitions from the decade of the 90s onwards. There were a lot of corruption, a lot of oligarch-related powers, a lot of mafia-related powers. And then you had the whole war thing, where you had the Chechens, and the Russians continuing to fight, even though there was peace. There was a lot of cleanup that had to be done. So I think she got caught up in that, and she lost her life tragically. But I don't know enough, and to be honest, I've read about this, but I haven't done the deep dive into this. I know there's controversy about her death, and and then someday, hopefully, the truth will come out.
All right. I hope you're satisfied with that answer, Turtle. Walt from the great state of Missouri, as some are wont to say. To paraphrase Mark Twain, concerning the difference between American political leaders and the jackass, some observers hold there isn't any. But this wrongs the jackass. Hold on. That's not a paraphrase. That's a quote.
That's a quote.
Thoughts?
I love the quote. And here's the only problem with that. That implies that there are American political leaders. Leader is an important word. Leadership implies certain traits, personality traits, certain level of integrity, etc. I think we got American politicians, but I don't see any. I mean, leaders out there. Maybe Donald Trump could be called a leader. I mean, look at the motivation that he gets. I agree with Vasca that there was a lot going on with Anya's reporting. That there's a whole number of different lines she could have crossed and people she could have irritated. And when you start investigating mafia, oligarchs, and money, you, especially during that time period, you could pay the ultimate price. So her death is tragic, and I hope we find out who did it. Yeah, I look, what it's basically saying is that American leaders suck. Political leaders suck, and it's an insult to call them a jackass, because a jackass doesn't deserve to be insulted in that fashion. And I certainly agree. Let's just take a look at the state of the current, political parties. Donald Trump is an outlier. He's not a traditional Republican. In fact, he used to be a Democrat. So let's put Donald Trump out of this equation. Your standard Republican leaders suck, and your standard Democratic leaders suck. They don't care about America. They don't care anything about America. It's all about politics. Even independent candidates have sold out to special interests. So I think that, American democracy has been fundamentally broken by the corruption of money. And until we remove money from the equation, we will have political leaders that are an insult to jackasses.
All right. And I will corroborate that. As a jackass, I can tell you that I am offended to be compared to politicians. So you're right on the money there, Scott. Thank you. It's good to have a jackass on hand when something like this comes up so you can verify it. Storm Crow 87 in the great city of London. If the IDF is defeated, do you think they are mad enough to use nuclear weapons? Would it be possible to shoot them all down?
I mean, the IDF is in the process of being defeated. It's not about the defeat of the IDF. It's about the existential survival of Israel. Israel's nuclear weapons. The great Seymour Hersh wrote a book called The Samson Option. And basically, Samson, of course, is from the Bible, reference to the strong man with the long hair. And Delilah seduced him, cut his hair, became weak. But in the end, he got his strength back and pushed down the temple and killed everybody. So the Samson option is, if we're going down, everybody's going down. We're pushing it in. The whole temple's coming down. Everybody dies. And that basically is the deterrence. It tells the, hundreds of millions of Arabs who live around Israel that if you want to destroy us, understand that we will kill all of you in the process. So it's not about defeating the IDF. The IDF is being defeated in Gaza right now. And if they go to war against Hezbollah, they're going to be defeated there. It comes down to the existential survival of Israel. And there's a difference. I mean, we're talking about a two-state solution, a one-state solution. If there's a negotiated process that Israel is participating in, then we don't have the panic and the fear. But if we see the collapse of the IDF, we see Arab armies overrunning Israel, we see the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of Israeli citizens, things like that, then I think the Israelis would use nuclear weapons. And no, you're not going to shoot them all down. They would inflict serious harm on the region. It'd also be the end of Israel, but they don't care because it's the Samson option, which means we're taking, and people are going, well, the Israelis wouldn't be crazy. Hannibal Directive. These are the guys that kill their own soldiers and their own civilians just because they've been taken hostage. They pump poison gas into, into tunnels and kill their own people, even though they know they're down there. No, the Israelis, they're man. I'm finishing up